Create list of single item repeated n times. I want to create a series of lists, all of varying lengths. Each list will contain the same element e, repeated n times, where n equals length of the list. How do I create the lists, without using the list comprehension, e for number in its range, n, for each list?
ITools has a function just for that. Of course ITools gives you an iterator instead of a list. E*n gives you a list, but, depending on what you will do with those sequences, the ITools variant can be much more efficient.
You can also write. You should know that if is, for example, an empty list, you get a list with n references to the same list, not an independent empty list. Performance testing. At first glance, it seems that repeat is the fastest way to create a list with n identical elements. But wait, it's not a fair test. The function itools.repeat doesn't actually create the list, it just creates an object that can be used to create a list if you wish. Let's try that again, but converting to a list. So if you want a list, use e or *n. If you want to generate the elements lazily, use repeat.
Be careful when the item being repeated is a list. The list will not be cloned, all the elements will refer to the same list.
Create list of single item repeated n times in Python. Depending on your use case, you want to use different techniques with different semantics. Multiply a list for immutable items. For immutable items, like none, bols, ints, floats, strings, tuples, or frozen sets, you can do it like this. For example, note that this is usually only used with immutable items, strings, tuples, frozen sets, etc. in the list, because they all point to the same item in the same place in memory. For an example use case, I use this when I have to build a table with a schema of all strings, so that I don't have to give a highly redundant one-to-one mapping. Multiply the list where we want the same item with mutable state repeated. Multiplying a list gives us the same elements over and over. The need for this is infrequent. This is sometimes used to map an iterable into a list of lists. We can see that a_list contains the same range iterator 4 times. Mutable items. I've used Python for a long time now, and I have seen very few use cases where I would do the above with mutable objects. Instead, to have repeated, say, a mutable empty list, set, or dict, you should do something like this. The underscore is simply a throwaway variable name in this context. If you only have the number, that would be. The underscore as the throwaway name is not really special, but a static code analyzer will probably complain if you don't intend to use the variable and use any other name. Caveats for using the multiplication method with mutable items. Beware doing this with mutable objects. When you change one of them, they all change because they're all the same object. Foo now returns. But with immutable objects, you can make it work because you change the reference, not the object. But again, mutable objects are no good for this, because in-place operations change the object, not the reference.
If you want to support the channel,